The billionaire fired his nanny in cold blood, but his little girl's reaction left him speechless. The iron gates of the Harrington estate had never looked so cold, so final, so indifferent to the breaking of hearts. Margaret Maggie Collins stood at the top of those marble steps for the very last time, her black suitcase rolling behind her, her white apron still tied neatly around her waist because she hadn't even been given the basic dignity of time to change out of her uniform. Beside her, little Emma, just 5 years old, barely reaching Maggie's hip, clutched her right hand so tightly that Maggie could feel the tiny fingernails pressing deep into her palm. On the other side, 7-year-old Lily held on just as desperately, fat tears streaming freely down her flushed little cheeks, her blonde curls bouncing as she struggled with everything she had to keep up with Maggie's reluctant steps toward the gate. Behind them all, Mr. Daniel Harrington, 41 years old, billionaire tech founder, a man who had graced the cover of Forbes magazine not once but twice, was chasing them down his own grand driveway in a perfectly pressed blue suit, shouting something urgent that the morning wind kept swallowing before it could reach anyone's ears. It had started, as most truly terrible things do, without any warning whatsoever. That morning had felt completely ordinary in every possible way. Maggie had made the girls their usual breakfast with the same quiet care she brought to everything. Warm oatmeal with freshly sliced strawberries for Emma, scrambled eggs with absolutely no pepper for Lily, who had recently and very seriously declared herself allergic to anything spicy. She had carefully braided their hair while the morning news played softly in the background. She had patiently listened to Lily practice her spelling words 3 times over. She had helped little Emma find the beloved stuffed rabbit that somehow, without fail, managed to disappear beneath the couch cushions every single night. It was a Tuesday morning. It felt exactly like every other Tuesday morning for the past 3 years of her life. Then Mr. Harrington had come downstairs earlier than his usual time. He was already fully dressed in his suit, already deep in a phone call, already wearing that tight, distant expression that Maggie had slowly learned to recognize over the years. The one that meant the brutal outside world had pushed its way into the house before breakfast was even finished and cleared away. He ended the call. He set his phone face down on the kitchen counter. He looked directly at Maggie with eyes that revealed absolutely nothing. "I need you gone by noon," he said flatly. She had been certain she misheard him completely. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" "I'm restructuring the household staff arrangement," he said, his gaze drifting somewhere past her left shoulder, refusing to settle on her face. "Your services are no longer required here. HR will send along your final check within the week." No explanation offered, no prior warning given, no acknowledgement of 3 years spent being the single most consistent, loving, and devoted presence in his 2 young daughters' daily lives. She was being dismissed as casually and coldly as one cancels a subscription service. Maggie did not cry. She did not argue, did not plead, did not demand an explanation she clearly was not going to receive. She had far too much genuine self-respect for begging, and far too much hard-earned wisdom to believe that a man like Daniel Harrington reversed his decisions easily or without significant reason. She simply gave a single, composed nod, turned away from him quietly, walked up the curved staircase, and began carefully packing her life into her suitcase. She had not expected the girls to notice so quickly. Children, she had always believed, were more perceptive than adults ever gave them credit for. Emma appeared in the doorway of Maggie's small, tidy room within just a few minutes, standing there in her pink dress with wide, genuinely confused brown eyes, one hand resting on the doorframe. "Are you going somewhere on a trip?" she asked in her small, careful voice. Maggie had set down the folded sweater in her hands and knelt slowly to Emma's level, taking both of the little girl's hands in her own. "I have to go live somewhere else now, my sweet girl," she said as gently as she possibly could. Emma's soft face crumpled instantly like paper held over a flame. "But why, Maggie? Did we do something bad?" And then Lily had appeared, quietly behind her younger sister in the doorway, instantly and accurately reading every detail of the room with that sharp, almost unsettling emotional intelligence that had always made Maggie's heart simultaneously swell with pride and ache with tenderness. "Daddy's making you leave," she said with quiet, devastating certainty. It was not a question at all. It was a 7-year-old stating a fact she had already fully processed and decided how to feel about. Maggie had pulled them both into a long, fierce hug and tried her absolute hardest to say a proper goodbye while keeping a steady smile on her face for their sakes. But neither girl would loosen their grip. And when Maggie finally stood, picked up the handle of her suitcase, and began walking toward those tall iron gates, both of his daughters simply walked with her. No hesitation, no looking back toward the house. They held her hands and they walked. That was the precise moment Daniel Harrington happened to glance up from his laptop screen in his second-floor home office. What he saw through that wide window stopped every thought in his head completely cold. His nanny was walking out through his front gates with her suitcase, and his daughters, both of them, still wearing their breakfast clothes, still wearing their soft house shoes on the hard cobblestones, were walking steadily beside her, their small hands locked in hers, showing absolutely no intention of turning back toward the enormous, beautiful, expensive house behind them. Something shifted and cracked somewhere deep inside his chest, in a place he had kept carefully locked and professionally managed for a very long time. He closed the laptop. He went downstairs faster than he normally moved. He pushed through the front door and stepped outside into the cool morning air. And then, without fully understanding his own reasoning, he began walking faster down the driveway, and then faster still, until he was doing something Daniel Harrington almost never did. He was running, in his Italian leather shoes, across his own cobblestone driveway, calling out a name he hadn't spoken with any warmth or kindness at all that entire morning. Maggie. She stopped at the gate. She turned around slowly with the quiet, measured composure of someone who had already made their peace with the situation. Both girls remained firmly attached to her hands on either side, like two small, determined anchors refusing to be moved by anything. He stopped several feet away from them, breathing noticeably harder than any man in his physical condition should be from such a short distance. He looked at his daughters, really looked at them, perhaps for the first time in longer than he wanted to honestly admit. Emma's small face was flushed deep red and soaked with tears. Lily was looking directly back at him with an expression he recognized with uncomfortable clarity because he had seen its twin reflected at him from bathroom mirrors during his worst moments. The look of someone who has just been deeply and unexpectedly disappointed by a person they genuinely trusted and depended on. "Daddy," Lily said with quiet, unwavering steadiness, "if Maggie has to go, then we're going too." She was 7 years old. She delivered those words with the absolute calm certainty of someone who had considered the matter fully, reached a firm decision, and would not be reasoned or sweet-talked or distracted out of it by any amount of adult logic. Daniel Harrington, a man who had successfully negotiated corporate contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, who had stared down hostile boardrooms and survived brutal media cycles and rebuilt entire companies from near collapse, felt something he had no prepared language for, standing on that driveway in the early morning light with his daughters looking at him like that. "Maggie," he said again, and the entire quality of his voice had changed into something quieter, rougher, and far more human. "Can I ask you something important?" She held his gaze but said nothing, waiting. "In 3 full years of you living in this house and caring for my children," he said slowly, choosing each word with visible effort, "did I ever once take the time to ask you why you chose this work?" She shook her head once. "Did I ever genuinely ask what my girls need from day to day? What makes them feel safe? What they're afraid of when the lights go out? What they love most in the whole world?" She shook her head again softly. He was silent for a long, uncomfortable moment that he did not try to rush past or fill with noise. "I let you go this morning because a new household manager I hired last month suggested I consolidate staff as part of a broader efficiency review." He paused, and the words seemed to cost him something real. "I gave it less than 60 seconds of thought. I make decisions every single week that affect thousands of employees, and I spend considerably more careful time on those than I spent this morning thinking about what you genuinely mean to my daughters and what losing you would actually do to them." Maggie remained still and quiet. She had learned through years of working with complicated, powerful, emotionally unavailable people that silence, offered without judgment, was frequently the most generous and powerful gift you could give someone in a moment of honest reckoning. "I was completely wrong," he finally said. And from Daniel Harrington, those 3 plain and undecorated words carried the full weight of a confession that hadn't come easily. "I was thoughtless, I was careless with something irreplaceable, and I was genuinely wrong, and I am asking you, if there is any part of you that is willing, to please come back to this house." Little Emma looked up at Maggie's face with an expression of almost unbearable hope. Lily kept her careful, watchful eyes fixed steadily on her father, not yet ready to fully exhale. "Why?" Maggie asked him simply, not with hostility, not with bitterness, with genuine and open curiosity. He looked down at his daughters for a long, quiet moment before answering. "Because when given a completely free choice between staying in a mansion and walking away with you," he said, "they chose you." Without a single second of hesitation. He looked back up at her. "I think that one simple fact tells me more about what actually matters in this life than every business book I've ever read combined." Maggie Collins walked back through those iron gates that same morning, but nothing inside that house remained entirely the same after that particular Tuesday. Daniel Harrington began showing up to breakfast with his daughters instead of taking his coffee upstairs to his office. He started asking Maggie genuine, thoughtful questions about what the girls were feeling, what they were struggling with, what he was consistently missing while his attention was elsewhere. He began putting his phone face down at the dinner table without being asked. He showed up, without anyone reminding him, to Emma's school play, and sat in the third row with a paper program in his hand, and actual tears in his eyes at the end.